A shadow at the celebration. Sienna Moretti stood at the edge of the yacht club terrace, watching champagne bubbles rise in her glass, like tiny transparent elevators, carrying nothing but air. Beyond the pristine white railings, San Francisco Bay stretched out in shimmering blues and greens, dotted with sailboats that looked like origami creations from this distance. Everything about the scene was perfect, too perfect, like a photograph in a magazine that you could admire, but never quite touch. Asterisk if you believe that true wealth lies not in bank accounts, but in human connection. Stay until the end of this remarkable story. Subscribe now and turn on notifications, because what happens next will change how you see success forever. Her twin sister Adriana floated through the crowd of 200 guests, her custom Vera Wang gown trailing behind her like sea foam. Every detail of this wedding had been meticulously planned over 18 months. The ivory rose centerpieces, the string quartet playing pachelbel, the 5-tier cake decorated with edible gold leaf. Nothing was left to chance, nothing except Sienna's growing sense that she was merely a prop in someone else's fairy tale. The invisible twine. At 28 years old, Sienna had grown accustomed to being the footnote in her sister's story. Adriana had the effortless charisma that drew people like moths to flame. She had graduated top of her class from Stanford Business School. She now worked as a vice president at a prestigious venture capital firm. She was marrying Garrett Preston, whose family owned half the commercial real estate in Northern California. Sienna, meanwhile, worked as a freelance graphic designer from her modest apartment in Oakland. She loved her work, the quiet satisfaction of creating beautiful things in solitude, but she knew how others saw her. The quieter twin, the artistic one, the girl who never quite lived up to her potential. Their father Vincent Moretti approached, his silver hair perfectly styled, his tuxedo-fitting hems had been painted on. He owned a successful import-export business that had made the family wealthy, though not wealthy enough to run in the Preston family's circles without some effort. Sienna, sweetheart, you look lonely over here, Vincent said, his voice carrying that gentle concern she had heard all her life. Why don't you go mingle? I saw some of Adriana's colleagues from the firm near the bar. I'm fine, Dad, Sienna replied, forcing a smile, just taking it all in. Vincent squeezed her shoulder before drifting back toward a cluster of business associates. Sienna knew he loved her, but she also knew she worried him. The daughter who never quite fit into the polished world he had worked so hard to build. An entrance that changed everything. This shift happened suddenly, like a record scratch at a dance party. Conversations faltered mid-sentence. Heads turned toward the club's entrance. Even the quartet seemed to play softer, as if the air itself had changed pressure. A man walked through the glass doors with the kind of confidence that suggested he owned every room he entered. He was probably in his mid-30s, wearing a midnight blue suit that made Sienna think of expensive Italian tailors and boardroom negotiations. His dark hair was styled casually, just messy enough to suggest he did not try too hard. But it was his eyes that caught her attention, steel gray and intensely focused as they swept across the reception. Julian Hawthorne. Even Sienna, who avoided business news like it was contagious, recognized him. He had founded Hawthorne Technologies at 25 and turned it into a Silicon Valley powerhouse worth billions. He was known for being brilliant, ruthless, and intensely private, the kind of person who made Forbes covers but declined most interviews. What was he doing at Adriana's wedding? Chaos in paradise. Julian walked directly toward the main table where Adriana and Garrett sat, surrounded by their wedding party. His expression was unreadable, but something in his posture suggested purpose, intent. He was not here by accident. Vincent Moretti moved quickly to intercept him, his face flushing red. Mr. Hawthorne, I don't believe you are on our guest list. This is a private family celebration. Julian stopped, his gaze moving from Vincent to Adriana, who had gone pale beneath her professional makeup. I apologize for the intrusion, Mr. Moretti, but I have information that concerns your family. Information about Claudia. The name hit like a thunderclap. Claudia Moretti, Sienna's mother, who had died 12 years ago in a car accident. the loss that had fractured their family in ways that still showed in the cracks. "How dare you?" Vincent's voice shook with rage and something else. Fear, perhaps. "You have no right to speak her name here." Adriana stood, her hand gripping Garrett's shoulder for support. "What information? What are you talking about?" Julian reached into his jacket and withdrew an envelope. Cream-colored, expensive paper, the kind used for important documents. "Your mother and I were engaged before she met your father. She never told you, did she? She never mentioned that we were supposed to be married." The reception had gone completely silent now. 200 guests, holding their collective breath. Sienna felt the ground tilt beneath her feet. This could not be real. This had to be some kind of terrible joke, but the look on her father's face told her everything. It was true. The weight of hidden truth silence that followed Julian Hawthorne's revelation felt thick enough to drown in. Sienna watched her father's face cycle through emotions like a slideshow. Shock, anger, fear, and finally a resignation that suggested he had always known this moment might come. Vincent Moretti, the man who had built his entire life on control and careful planning, looked suddenly vulnerable. Adriana's voice cut through the tension, sharp and demanding. "That's impossible. Mother never mentioned you. Not once. If you were engaged, why would she keep that secret?" Julian's expression softened slightly as he looked at the twin sisters. "Because your father asked her to. Because starting fresh meant burying the past completely. But some secrets have a way of surfacing when they matter most." Garrett Preston stood, placing himself protectively beside his new bride. His family's wealth had taught him how to handle confrontation with polished diplomacy. "Mr. Hawthorne, I don't know what game you're playing, but this is neither the time nor place. Whatever issue you have with the Moretti family can be addressed through proper channels." "This isn't a game," Julian replied, his voice calm but firm. "And it's not about revenge or disruption. It's about truth, about promises made and broken, about a woman who deserved better than to have her entire history erased." Sienna found herself moving forward, drawn by something she could not name. While Adriana radiated outrage and Vincent looked ready to call security, Sienna felt an odd pull of curiosity. Their mother had always been somewhat of a mystery to her. Claudia had died when the twins were 16, and before that, she had been loving but distant, as if part of her had always been somewhere else. "What's in the envelope?" Sienna asked, her voice quieter than she intended, but carrying in the hushed space photographs that spoke volume. Julian's eyes met hers, and for a moment, something flickered there. Recognition, perhaps, or respect for being the only one asking questions instead of making demands. He opened the envelope and withdrew several photographs, laying them carefully on the white linen tablecloth. The first image showed a younger version of their mother, probably in her early 20s, laughing with her head thrown back. She wore a simple sundress and stood on a beach somewhere tropical. Beside her was a younger Julian, his arm around her waist, both of them looking at each other with the kind of intensity that needed no explanation. The second photograph showed Claudia wearing an engagement ring, her hand extended toward the camera. The ring caught the light, a distinctive vintage design with an emerald surrounded by diamonds. Sienna's breath caught. She had seen that ring before, tucked away in a velvet box in her mother's things. Vincent had told them it was a family heirloom, nothing more. "We were together for 3 years, Julian said, his voice taking on a quality of remembrance. "We met at Berkeley. She was studying art history. I was working on my first startup in a garage with 2 other guys who thought I was crazy. She believed in me when no one else did. She said yes when I proposed on her 24th birthday." Vincent finally found his voice, though it came out strained. "And then she met me. She chose me, Julian. She chose our life together. Whatever you two had, it ended. She moved on, did she?" Julian's question hung in the air. Or did circumstances force her hand? The truth beneath the surface. Adriana snatched one of the photographs, studying it with the analytical intensity she brought to all her business deals. "This proves you knew her. It doesn't prove anything else. People break engagements all the time. It's unfortunate, But it happens, your mother didn't just break our engagement, Adriana, Julian said, using her name with a familiarity that made Sienna's skin prickle. She discovered she was pregnant, with twins, and the timing was complicated. The world seemed to tilt sideways. Sienna grabbed the back of a chair to steady herself. Around them, guests had begun whispering furiously, phones appearing as people tried to capture this unexpected drama. The perfect wedding was unraveling in real time. "You're saying what? Exactly?" Carrot demanded, his diplomatic mask slipping. "That you're their biological father. That's quite a claim to make without proof." "I'm not claiming anything about biology," Julian corrected. "The twins are Vincent's daughters. The DNA would prove that without question." But when Claudia discovered she was pregnant, she was still engaged to me. We were planning our wedding. And then Vincent entered the picture. Vincent's face had gone from red to ashen. Claudia came to me for help. Her parents were traditional, conservative. They would have been devastated by an unplanned pregnancy. I offered her a solution: marriage, stability, a fresh start. "You offered her money," Julian countered, his voice hardening. "You offered to pay off her family's debts if she married you instead, if she agreed to never speak of our relationship again. To pretend I had never existed." A sister's realization. Sienna's mind raced, connecting pieces she had never thought to question. Her mother's melancholy, the way Claudia would sometimes stare out windows for hours, as if watching for something that never came, the locked drawer in her desk that the twins had discovered after her death, filled with letters they had never been allowed to read before Vincent burned them. "The letters," Sienna whispered. "In Mom's desk. They were from you," Julian nodded. "I wrote her every month for 10 years. She never responded, but I needed her to know that my feelings hadn't changed. That if she ever wanted a different life, I would be waiting." Adriana's mask of composure cracked. "So what? You're here to, what? Claim some kind of emotional ownership over our dead mother? To ruin my wedding because you couldn't accept rejection decades ago?" "I'm here because your mother left something for you," Julian said, withdrawing another envelope from his jacket. She gave it to her lawyer, with instructions to deliver it to her daughters on one of their wedding days. She wanted you to know the truth before you made your own commitments, before you built your lives on the same foundation of secrets that destroyed hers. The second envelope was addressed in handwriting Sienna recognized immediately. Her mother's graceful script, slightly slanted to the right. The sight of it made her throat tighten with grief and confusion. Vincent moved to intercept, but Julian stepped back, holding the envelope out of reach. "This isn't yours, Vincent. It never was. Claudia wanted her daughters to have this. Are you really going to deny them that?" The letter that changed everything. Adriana reached out with a trembling hand and took the envelope. For a moment, she just stood there, this woman who always knew exactly what to do, looking lost. Then she tore it open with decisive movements and withdrew several handwritten pages. Sienna moved closer, reading over her sister's shoulder. Their mother's words filled the pages, written in the careful prose of someone who knew she might not have another chance to speak. "My darling girls," the letter began, "if you're reading this, it means one of you is about to make the most important decision of your life. Before you do, I need you to understand the choices I made and why I made them. I need you to learn from my mistakes." The letter went on to describe Claudia's relationship with Julian, the depth of their connection, the future they had planned together. It explained how she had discovered her pregnancy and panicked, knowing her conservative parents would be devastated. It detailed how Vincent had appeared like a solution to all her problems, offering stability and respectability. "But I paid a price for that security," Claudia wrote. "I spent 20 years married to a good man I never truly loved. I gave you both a stable home, but I denied you the example of what real partnership is like. I chose safety over passion, and while I don't regret having you, my precious daughters, I regret teaching you to do the same." Adriana's hand shook as she read. Beside her, Garrett looked uncomfortable, perhaps recognizing elements of their own relationship in the description, a partnership built on logic and mutual benefit, rather than consuming passion. The letter concluded with a plea. Don't make my mistake. Don't choose security over truth. Don't build your life on secrets and compromises. Find someone who sees all of you, the messy and complicated parts, and loves you anyway. Find what I had with Julian and was too afraid to keep. Aftermath of Revelation's reception had dissolved into chaos. Guests were leaving, called away by the awkwardness, or staying to witness more drama. The wedding planner stood frozen, unsure whether to serve dinner or cancel everything. The string quartet had packed up and disappeared. Adriana looked at Garrett with eyes that held 1,000 unspoken questions. He looked back at her with growing understanding and something that might have been relief. We should talk, he said quietly. Really talk about why we're doing this. Vincent sat heavily in a chair, suddenly looking every one of his 62 years. I loved her, he said to no one in particular. Maybe not the way Julian did, but I loved her. I gave her a good life. You gave her a cage, Julian replied, but without malice. A gilded one, but still a cage. Sienna looked at the photographs scattered across the table, at the letter in her sister's hands, at the man who had loved her mother enough to wait decades for a truth to surface. She thought about her own life, her own careful choices to stay small and invisible, to never risk too much or want too much. Her mother's words echoed in her mind. Find someone who sees all of you and loves you anyway. The unraveling 3 hours. After Julian Hawthorne's arrival, the yacht club terrace had emptied to just the key players in this unexpected drama. The catering staff had cleared away the untouched dinner courses. The cake sat abandoned, a monument to celebration that never happened. Harbour lights reflected off the dark water, and fog was beginning to roll in from the Pacific, wrapping everything in gauzy uncertainty. Adriana sat at a table with Garrett, the letter spread between them like a map to territory they wanted to explore. They spoke in low voices, having the kind of honest conversation that should have happened months ago. Maybe years ago. Vincent stood at the railing, staring out at the water. Julian had given him space, but remained present, a ghost from the past made flesh. And Sienna found herself drawn to the photographs again, studying her mother's faithful clues she had missed all these years. She looks free in these pictures, Sienna said aloud. I never saw her look like that. Not once in my entire childhood. Julian moved to stand beside her, careful to maintain respectful distance. Claudia had this laugh that could light up a room. She was passionate about everything: art, music, social justice. She wanted to open a gallery featuring emerging artists from underrepresented communities. She had so many dreams. What happened to them? Sienna asked, though she already knew the answer. They got filed away under practical considerations and family obligations, Julian replied. Vincent gave her security, but he also gave her a very specific role to play: the perfect wife, the elegant hostess, the mother who attended every school function, but never quite pursued her own ambitions. A father's confession. Vince turned from the railing, his face haggard. I knew I wasn't her first choice. I knew that every day of our marriage. But I thought I could make her happy. I thought if I gave her everything, a beautiful home, financial freedom, wonderful daughters, that eventually she would love me the way I loved her. Did she ever? Julian's question was gentle, not cruel. I don't know, Vincent admitted, and the honesty of it seemed to cost him something. There were moments when I thought maybe she had come to care for me, but there was always this distance, this part of herself she kept locked away where I couldn't reach. I told myself it was enough, that what we had was enough. Sienna felt tears streaming down her face. She was sad. I remember that now. We always thought it was just her personality, that she was naturally melancholic, that she was grieving, wasn't she? Grieving the life she gave up. Vincent's shoulders sagged. After the accident, When we were going through her things, I found journals. 20 years worth of journals filled with letters she wrote but never sent, all addressed to Julian. Every important moment, every achievement, every time one of you girls did something remarkable, she wrote to him about it. Like he was the person she really wanted to share her life with. The confession hung in the fog-dampened air. Julian's expression was unreadable, but his hands had curled into fists at his sides. Why didn't you tell us? Adriana's voice cut across the terrace. She had left Garrett at the table and approached with the kind of controlled fury that meant she was barely holding herself together. Why did we have to learn about this today? Like this? We had a right to know who our mother really was. Adriana's reckoning Vince spread his hands helplessly. Because I was ashamed. Because I didn't want you to know that your parents' marriage was built on a transaction, that I essentially bought your mother away from the man she loved. What father wants his daughters to know that? Honest one, Adriana snapped. A father who trusts his daughters to handle complicated truths. Instead, you let us build our entire understanding of love and marriage on a lie. She turned to look at Garrett, who still sat at the table watching. I can't marry you, Garrett. Not today. Maybe not ever. Because looking at those photographs, reading that letter, I realize we're about to make the same mistake my parents made. We're choosing security and social approval over actual passion, over real connection. Garrett nodded slowly, and there was relief in his expression. I know. I've been thinking the same thing for the past hour. We're great partners, Adriana. We make sense on paper. But when I imagine 50 years of marriage, I don't feel excitement. I feel resignation. And that's not fair to either of us. The maturity of the exchange surprised Sienna. This was not a dramatic breakup, but rather two intelligent people recognizing an incompatibility before it became a lifetime mistake. Adriana slipped off her engagement ring and placed it gently in Garrett's palm. Thank you, she said quietly, for being honest, for not trying to convince me we could make it work through sheer determination. Your mother's letter was right, Garrett replied. We both deserve more than a marriage that makes sense. We deserve one that feels right. Sienna's momentous Adriana and Garrett said their goodbyes with surprising grace. Sienna found herself standing beside Julian again. The fog had thickened, creating an intimate cocoon that made conversation feel both easier and more dangerous. Why did you really come today? She asked. The letter could have been delivered by your lawyer. You didn't have to show up in person. Didn't have to make such a dramatic entrance. Julian was quiet for a long moment. Because I wanted to see Claudia's daughters. I wanted to meet the two people she loved more than anything in the world. And because I was hoping that maybe one of you had inherited her courage, her refusal to settle for less than authentic connection. She gave up that courage, Sienna pointed out. She chose security over love. She chose you and your sister over uncertainty. Julian corrected. She was young and scared and made the best decision she could with the information she had. But she never stopped regretting it, and she made me promise, years ago, when we reconnected briefly before her death, that I would make sure you girls knew the truth, that I would give you the choice she felt she didn't have. Sienna looked at this man who had carried a torch for her mother for over 3 decades, who had built an empire but remained unmarried because he had never found what he lost. It was romantic and tragic and completely terrifying. What happens now? She asked. Julian smiled, and it transformed his face from severe to almost gentle. Now you all decide what to do with the truth. Your father decides whether he can forgive himself for choices made decades ago. Adriana decides what she really wants from life. And you, Sienna, you decide whether you're going to keep hiding in the shadows or step into the light your mother always wanted for you. New beginning. Foghorn sounded from somewhere out in the bay, a low mournful note that seemed to acknowledge all the grief and regret floating in the air. Vincent approached slowly, looking older than Sienna had ever seen him. I'm sorry, he said, addressing both his daughters, but looking primarily at Sienna, as if he knew she was the one most affected. I'm sorry for the secrets, for the lies, for building your understanding of love on such a fragile foundation. Your mother was extraordinary, and I was selfish to think I could make her happy through material means alone. Adriana, showing the resilience that had always defined her, stepped forward and hugged their father. We're going to need time to process this, all of it, but I'm glad we know. I'm glad the truth came out before I made the same mistake. Sienna joined the embrace, feeling the complicated tangle of love, disappointment, and understanding that defined family. They stood like that for a long moment, three people bound by blood and secrets, trying to find their way to honest ground. When they separated, Julian was preparing to leave. I'll have my lawyer send you copies of everything. The photographs, the letters Claudia wrote, all of it. It belongs to you now. What you do with it is your choice. Wait, Sienna called out as he turned to go. Did she talk about us? In those letters, what did she say? Julian's expression softened. She said Adriana had her determination and drive, that you would change the world if you decided to. And she said Sienna had her soul, her ability to see beauty in unexpected places, her quiet strength that people often mistook for weakness. She was incredibly proud of both of you, even if the life she chose meant she couldn't always show it the way she wanted. 6 months later, a small art gallery in Hayes Valley was nothing fancy. Exposed brick walls, polished concrete floors, track lighting that illuminated the paintings without overwhelming them. But it was Sienna's, bought with a small inheritance her mother had left specifically for this purpose, revealed only after Julian's revelations prompted a full examination of Claudia's estate. The opening night exhibition featured emerging artists from underrepresented communities, exactly the kind of show her mother had dreamed of hosting. Adriana stood beside her, having taken a leave from her firm to figure out what she actually wanted, rather than what looked good on paper. Vincent attended with a date, a warm, intelligent woman he had met at a grief support group. He seemed lighter somehow, unburdened by the weight of secrets he had carried for so long. And Julian came too, not as a romantic prospect, but as a friend, someone who understood the complicated legacy of Claudia Moretti and wanted to honor her memory by supporting her daughter's authentic pursuits. As Sienna welcomed guests into her gallery, surrounded by art and possibility, she thought about her mother's letter, about choosing passion over security, about being seen fully and loved anyway, about having the courage to build something real rather than something that just looked right from the outside. The perfect wedding had been shattered that day on the terrace, but from the broken pieces, something more genuine had emerged. 3 people learning to be honest, 2 sisters discovering who they were beyond their prescribed roles, and a family finally built on truth, rather than carefully maintained illusions. Sienna raised her glass in a silent toast to the mother she was only now beginning to truly know, the woman who had sacrificed her own dreams, but made sure her daughters would have the courage to pursue theirs. In the end, Julian Hawthorne's unexpected arrival had not destroyed a wedding. It had freed them all to finally start living authentic lives. And that, Sienna thought as she greeted another gallery visitor with genuine warmth, was the greatest gift her mother could have given them. The truth, however painful, and the freedom that came with it.